It's Soundside on KUOW. I'm Libby Denkmann. It's a well-known pandemic story. Restaurants closed their doors to diners, so people sat at home. And if they could afford it, they had meals delivered through apps. And those apps flourished. In 2021, DoorDash's reported revenue was just under $5 billion, a 69% increase from 2020. But here in Seattle, workers who deliver for those apps say they are underpaid and don't have the same labor protections other workers can count on. A policy package sponsored by City Council members Lisa Herbold and Andrew Lewis aims to fix that.
I want City Council to know that this isn't a side gig. I'm not doing this to save for vacation or to buy a PS5. I'm doing this to pay rent, buy food, buy medicine, survive.
That was Magnolia Klee, a gig worker with TaskRabbit, who was speaking during public comment on the proposal earlier this month. The package has been dubbed the Pay Up Ordinance. And to learn more and hear what gig workers across our city are experiencing, I'm joined by Danielle Alvarado, Executive Director of Working Washington and Fair Work Center. That's an advocacy nonprofit that focuses on improving wages and conditions for gig workers. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Also joining us is Raymond Evans, a DoorDash driver and organizer with the Pay Up campaign. Hi, Raymond. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Libby. Thank you for having us.
So, Danielle, let's start with you. For those coming to this issue for the first time, what would the Pay Up Ordinance for app-based gig workers do? Can you break down some major provisions?
So the Pay Up policy will establish, among other things, minimum wage after expenses for gig workers, will retain flexibility, which is a critical part of what makes this work for workers, and will also ensure transparency to make sure that workers have the critical information they need to make sure that the jobs they're taking work for them.
And this is for workers who do calls within the city of Seattle. Is that the area that this will take effect in?
Exactly. So it's going to cover jobs on the apps that take place in Seattle.
Raymond, tell us about your experience as a DoorDash driver here in the city. Can you walk us through what's an average day for your DoorDash shift like?
Well, it's busy. First of all, it's hectic. It involves cars, pedestrians, bicycles, buses, transportation, restaurants that oftentimes don't have facilities for us to use the restrooms, parking, fees. These are just some of just getting to the actual call. These are some of the things you need to deal with. And then you pick up your food from the restaurant, nice staff usually. You get back in your car, you decide where you're going to go, and you start moving that direction. Some of these jobs, it varies, $8 to $10, sometimes $12, $14 for deliveries. But you've got to factor in also, gas, time. Sometimes to get from a restaurant in downtown Seattle just over to Madison Park can take you 20, 25 minutes, depending on, what's going on that day. You find out what the house is, you get there at the door, and you deliver it with this smile, and you're getting there, and you've hustled, and you've gone up the stairs, and jumped in your car and in and out, and you haven't damaged it in any way, and you've got the food still intact and nothing spilled in your car, and you arrive at the folks' house and you deliver their food. They say thank you, and they're really ecstatic. And you go to sign out, you accept the deal, and you realize you made $8 for 20 minutes of work, sometimes less. And some of those hours and those days can be, arduous tasks, and it kind of ebbs and flows. But to know that you're doing 20 minutes of work for sometimes $4, it feels disparaging, and it's hard to continue that momentum of service. At the end of the day, it's not equitable some days for people to go home with, $6 to $8 an hour for a day's work when they factor in, the cost of the brakes and the tires and the oil and everything that are coming up, the maintenance fees that are going to sometimes they're mounting, but sometimes you don't even have the money to meet those needs and meet those.
So the pay that you receive at the end of that delivery, that includes the driving to the restaurant, the picking it up, and then the driving to your delivery location and handing over the food. It does not include anything in between when you drop off the food and then you pick up your next order and you accept your next order.
Some of the platforms do offer a small stipend per mileage that's factored in there. That's one of the factors they use to arrive at, what they're going to pay you for that. The challenge is, some customers, I've gone actual customers say, well, what did you pay for your delivery? Just out of curiosity. I paid $16. It's like, well, I saw 4 of it. And they're like, well. And so people, this thought that I'm paying the driver, and actually you're paying a corporation that's going to determine what they want us to have. And then there's also mileage factored in there. So some of the platforms, I think, offer 58 or a certain amount of percentage, per mile. And then they factor in some time based upon what it would they estimate to be, not actual time that there's accident or construction or your cars, those other factors that can vary. They have their system of what they feel we should be compensated for, and it doesn't keep in consideration what we need.
And so in your mind, Raymond, how would the pay up ordinance change your day-to-day as a gig worker, as an app-based driver?
It gives us the ability to plan our lives. You cannot plan when all the variants are moving, and the individuals involved in our outcome and our final pay don't even understand their roles. Customers are paying $16 and $20 for a delivery, and they're thinking, well, we're making a living. You have a car. It's like, no, it's a rental, and they're charging me $1,000 a month for that. There's an expense for this. And so I think the pay up campaign and the platform, the legislation will really allow us at the end of the day to say, I can put in 8 hours of work, and I know I can bring home this amount of money. I can plan my life now. I can think about where I'm going to be living, even so far as right now, this housing shortage we're going through in the nation. It is increasingly difficult to go in and apply for apartments when you have to have a P&L statement. They want your back year's tax returns. They want a forecast of what you're making, but you can't determine those factors if you don't have those elements in place. So it's essential that these companies not only pay us a manageable portion of a livable wage, but also give people the ability to take care of their vehicles, which is how they make their money. A lot of these platforms, these organizations, these companies know they're getting over by having the driver be responsible for the vehicle. That's the largest expense in this, it's the wheels. And if companies want to really move forward in a capacity that ensures their own growth, that sustains them, I'm not saying give us the company, no, but give us the fair due for work performed. And it isn't that way right now. And there's this philosophy and culture that if I pay you a decent livable wage, then I'm not going to be able to live. And it's just like, I don't understand where that comes from. Aren't we all elements in the same stew? And, if I'm a bad carrot and a batch of ratatouille, the whole pot's out.
I'm speaking with Raymond Evans, a DoorDash driver and organizer with the Pay Up campaign, and Danielle Alvarado, executive director of Working Washington and Fair Work Center. Danielle, we just heard Raymond talking about his experience driving for DoorDash and the frustration and the realities of the small amount of money he takes home per delivery. In your mind, how does this legislation in Seattle change that if it does pass?
This is going to be a tremendous opportunity for us to clarify and commit as a city in 2022 that work is going to be paid fairly. Work that people like Raymond are doing is critical to our local economy, to our communities, and it's going to make sure that that work is compensated and respected. And it's going to help us make sure that the recovery we have after the pandemic in Seattle is equitable and make sure that all workers are included. And it's going to help make sure that we continue to be a leader in ensuring that all workers have workplace protections no matter what kind of work they do.
This question's for Danielle, but Raymond, I'd love for you to jump in as well. Local business owners, some have voiced fears that if prices go up for food delivery, that consumers will be ordering fewer meals from their businesses, and that would affect their bottom line as well. Do you have any reaction to that, Danielle?
Libby, this is the pretty standard industry line we have every single time we talk about improving conditions for workers. And it's the line we had in the late 1800s when Washington established a minimum wage, the first minimum wage in the country. And this thought that, our economy can't adapt and make sure that workers that are doing the work are respected and compensated, it just hasn't borne out. And it hasn't borne out over the course of the pandemic either, when we've seen huge increase in need. And the work that these workers have done has made it possible for others to stay home, right? We've had so many people who have needed to rely on delivery work, and this part of the economy has thrived. And we think that right now we're in a situation where we have workers who are reliant on food stamps and other public assistance who are working. And I think having a situation where we have work not really keeping people in a stable position, like that's not something that we need to accept in Washington. And we think that when we pass this, we're going to see this part of the economy continue to thrive with workers at the center of it.
Raymond?
And it's also, as Danielle was saying this, I can't help but think, if the prices go up, we absorb them other places. If people are staying home and their quality of lives are improving and they see the benefit, it'll just be a matter of time before we always adjust and adapt to what those changes are, like Danielle was saying. And I don't see it being an issue at all. It is a talking point used by the opposition. They want to keep things like they are and keep them, from growing and evolving. But evolution is inevitable. And as we things evolve in our community. We always find a way to compensate for them.
Some opposed on the city council have said that they feel like it hasn't been studied enough, that there are unintended consequences potentially if the policy is put in place. But I'm hearing you say that you believe the data is there, that this has been looked at sufficiently in order for the pay up proposal to go forward.
We've had extensive stakeholdering over the past year, and that's only once we've gotten to the place where there's been this policy in its more refined form. And so the companies have been there, many community organizations have been there, worker organizations have been there. We have very excellent staff at the city who have put their very intelligent brains on this. And so we think that policy is ready. And I think the data is out there. And also we know that in Seattle in 2022, work that's getting paid at $2 an hour is just not work that we can accept. And so the data is out there, and workers, more than anybody, the workers know, the workers have driven this policy development. Like people like Raymond have been at the core of our work to understand what the issues are and also what the solutions are. And so for us, it's really clear because workers' voices have been clear about what their priorities are and what they think would make their experience in this industry better.
Raymond, the pandemic turned drivers like you into essential workers overnight. The companies behind these apps have been making billions of dollars, record profits since the pandemic began. What do you want consumers who use these apps to understand about the experience of drivers like you?
They really should be aware that we are not being fully compensated at the rate they're paying. There are other expenses, there are other hands in the pot, so to speak, of their what they're paying with that fee. And it's not a livable wage. It's not a little, and not all companies are equitable. And we need to have policies, the insight to make sure and foster a culture of transparency so people are able to see where their dollars are actually going. Because right now, your delivery driver, chances are your delivery driver probably lives in substandard quarters and environs somewhere further out than you understand because they can't afford to live in the city anymore. And they're going through quite a bit of an effort to make sure that you have hot meals on your table and you can afford that ability to not have to get out in traffic and, or be out of the home where you have to stop. Maybe you're a caretaker for elderly or children and you've got to figure out dinner and you got to go get them together and wrangle them up and get in the car and get to the restaurant, find parking, not leave them alone. And, there's a lot that goes into getting that meal to your table every night. And if people can understand that it's the person delivering your food and making your food hot and making it at your table might not even have that same option.
Danielle, would Seattle be a test case for other cities to adopt these kinds of protections, or have we seen them anywhere else in the country yet?
This is the first policy of its kind that's focused on the needs of delivery drivers like Raymond. And we hope it's a test case for the rest of the country. We think that due to the expertise of the workers who have led this campaign, we have really thought of policy proposals that are responsive to how this industry works. And we know it's not going away. And our job is to help think about how do we make this part of the economy thrive, again, making sure that workers are part of that equation. And so we hope that what we are doing here in Seattle will provide some guidance and some inspiration to the rest of the country to make sure that we continue to innovate, to make sure that labor standards in the 21st century reflect the needs of workers like Raymond.
That's Danielle Alvarado, the executive director of Working Washington and Fair Work Center, and Raymond Evans, a DoorDash driver and an organizer with the Pay Up campaign. Thank you both for joining us today on Soundside.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
And not everyone is on board with Pay Up quite yet. Back with more Soundside. We'll discuss that in just a minute. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkmann. We're talking about Pay Up, a new policy package currently being examined by the Seattle City Council. The package is made up of 6 different bills and would require companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub to pay gig workers Seattle's minimum wage plus a per minute and per mile floor for the time it takes drivers to complete an order. The Seattle City Council has been meeting with industry stakeholders about Pay Up since last June, and advocates say right now is Seattle's opportunity to take a stand for gig workers. But others are saying it's time to pump the brakes. Here's Seattle City Council member Sarah Nelson at a committee meeting last week.
My problem has always been the inevitable unintended consequences on the drivers, the small businesses that are supported by these apps, and the customers when you impose a single regulatory framework on such a wide diversity of business models.
And to get a perspective from some local business leaders on the pay up proposal, I'm joined by Marcos Wanless, the president and founder of the Seattle Latino Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much for opening the door to us, the Seattle Latino Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce.
Well, could you start by telling us about what the past 2 years of this pandemic has been like for members of the Latino business community here in Seattle?
The pandemic really hit us Latinos hard, and people of color, businesses, Latinos, African Americans, we were very harshly hit. But of course, this means that all the businesses, all the small micro businesses that were catered, that were based on landscaping, that were based on food, that were based on the outdoors, well, really, really suffered because of the pandemic. So now we have learned to go through different channels to make our businesses grow again and stand up, and many businesses had to close for this. Now we are very, very open and carefully studying every other alternative that we have as a revenue source, and this is one of them. The app-based jobs, for example.
How have app-based jobs made a difference in the Latino community and the Latino business community? How have restaurant owners and other businesses used food delivery apps like DoorDash or Grubhub to support their businesses?
Well, as you know, we needed to have some sort of support, some sort of line to keep revenue flowing. And the possibility, because most places were closed, now we're open. We're starting up our open economy again. But when we were shut down, the only way to sell things was either through online applications or through deliveries or takeouts in the case of restaurants and food. Yeah. So the only way that the businesses could actually keep selling and keep open was delivering takeout orders and receiving these takeout orders. And no wonder, no surprise, that's what the app-based business is, specifically the delivery business that's based on apps, really grew exponentially. And that was good for us because that gave us the opportunity to earn, to have a working businesses. And otherwise, without it, it would have been very tough just to open the window for a takeout order.
Marcos, you wrote a letter on behalf of the Seattle Latino Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce about the pay-up proposal before the Seattle City Council. And in your letter, you said that while you're not opposed to app-based regulation or the establishment of a minimum earnings standard, you are concerned about the unintended consequences pay-up could have on the Latino business community. Can you expand on that? What do you see as potential consequences?
We are very worried. And again, the board of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, of the Seattle Latino Chamber of Commerce, myself, all the staff, and all our members, we want to progress. We want to earn more money. We want to have our Latino community earning on par with other minorities, and of course, with the white majority. That's the essence of what we're doing. So we are in favor of analyzing every possibility available so we can grow and our incomes can grow with our work. So that is the vision that we have. Now, in order to proceed and have any legislation, any ruling that would make sense for this, that would actually provoke and propel our income to grow higher, it has to be really thought out carefully, which is, by the way, something that the Council of Seattle has promised to do. They have promised always to really analyze any unintended consequences that could go wrong by applying new laws, especially with minorities. They have pledged to do that. We want to be positive about this, but it needs to be studied. It cannot just pass like that because there will be unintended consequences then.
And what could those be? I mean, what are you hearing from business owners that they're concerned about that could occur if you increased, the pay, for example, for drivers for the drive time when they accept a job? All these different elements of the pay-up proposal. What are the concerns that this could cause in the business community?
Well, first of all, every time that we see one-way action, whether it's incrementing prices, labor, whatever you see, an unintended hike of it, and it's not well studied, there's always a price to pay. Somebody's going to end up paying it. Most likely, it's going to be the consumer and the business, most likely. And now, what happens when we have this? Then instead of provoking the creation of more jobs, having more opportunities, then what's going to happen is that the marketplace is going to reduce, the prices are going to go higher, and then instead of delivering, having a base of 100 persons delivery, then you're going to have to cut it to 70 or 30, or you have to cut it. So that's why we're asking the Seattle Council to make an amendment and stop it for a moment so we can really break this proposal, which is a good proposal. In the essence of a proposal is good. You know, to take care of workers is always a good idea. But let's do it smartly and not just put up a rule that intends to do something and ends up actually affecting even the workers that they were trying to help.
You mentioned in your letter that there could also be consequences for other workers in the Latino business community, like handymen and women, movers, cleaners, and caretakers. How would these workers potentially be impacted?
Well, what we're trying to also convey is, first of all, when you hike up or put a specific minimum wage, the whole system gets affected. And the restaurants, for example, hire people. A lot of app-based stores, again, have employees, they have owners. So it's not only one side of the economy that gets affected, but it goes around. It makes a wave and it affects a lot of the businesses. And that is exactly what can be helped right now if we just go about it at the council, the City of Seattle Council goes about it more smartly. I mean, there is no rush. There is no fire. We can do this very well. This can really represent something which, you know, we don't have any standard nationwide. So this is going to be setting precedents. Let's set a good precedence for this. Let's really talk with businesses, with people of color businesses, and see what is their perspective and what other alternatives we have for getting the employee to earn more money. That is what we're proposing.
I'm talking with Marcos Wanless, the president and founder of the Seattle Latino Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, about the pay up proposal for app-based gig workers in the city of Seattle. And Marcos, what's the data that you're looking for the city council to collect? What information would you like to see gathered before they move forward with pay up?
Basic economic information on how this cost will affect both businesses, how this is going to trickle down, how is it going to be paid, how the players are going to be affected or benefited by it, and at least to have a simple rundown situation where we have, okay, this is the probable economic effect that we have seen out of making a study, out of, again, getting with the Latino Chamber of Commerce, and we can get together and we can create a little focus group to understand how this is going to affect us. And that's what we want to do. We are open for that, but there hasn't been anything like that done before passing this proposal. So we're very worried about that.
Marcos Wanless, the president and founder of the Seattle Latino Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for joining us today on Soundside.
Thank you for opening the door to us, and hello to all the audience. And again, thank you for listening to us. We hope we have made our point clear today.
The next discussion of the pay-up legislation is scheduled for next Tuesday in the Seattle City Council, and a committee vote is slated for early May.